Nice to see everybody again, and hope everybody's well. What we're going to try and do today is, well, we're going to introduce Grisdale, explain us a little bit, just a fraction of what we've been doing, bearing in mind that we've been doing this for 20 years. So there's quite a build-up of material. And then I wanted to look at the questions that we discussed at the last meeting. So I've sent out a written answer, but I'll talk to those, and then all of you to explain, to come forward with your answers to those questions, if you have them. And then maybe a bit more of a general discussion about what the network's for and what people want to achieve, because I wasn't really clear about what if there are actual aims for the whole, for us as a group, or whether we all have different aims. So let's start off by talking a bit about Grisdale. Are there any vegetarians? Yes. Right, we'll skip a couple of slides.
How many vegetarians?
Davey is.
So
I won't be traumatized.
You won't be.
Show the deer.
Yeah, I've got it in the slides. So can you all see that?
Yeah.
Shall I go big screen?
Yeah. If you say present view or play from start.
Yeah, got it. So that's Lawson Park now. Obviously in summer, and that was Lawson Park 10 years ago. So just, I think, probably trying to make the point that the organisation is very much about making the best of what is already here, what we have, and sort of developing it over long periods of time. So that the development of that building, it's a small farmhouse, and developing all the gardens around it, the whole offer really of the site, is something we built over a long period of time. And there's another project, the same illustration. That's the project which is actually as a house, so it's a house build thing which we did also 10 years ago at the same time, using local wood and all. In many ways, both these build projects are quite unique in an area like this, which is very traditional, well, so traditional as to be ridiculous, but very much a kind of theme park of a place. So any square profile buildings like this one, for example, don't really struggle to be allowed to get planning permission. So these are kind of, although they look fairly normal, they're actually quite radical projects for an area like this. And both of these projects have had a fairly significant effect, I would say, on the local culture. So the organisation is quite small, but works with a lot of different people. And this is a restoration of the village hall. And that's probably about 1/10 of the entire village. So it's quite a small place. And we have, for the last 10 years, been working really fairly exclusively with the immediate community, the immediate village, and trying to help that evolve. So to avoid kind of the gentrification process that happens often when places change, and to kind of focus on, again, what's already here, who's already here, what skills they have, and how we can be more creative with what is available. So that was, in fact, but in all these instances, we're very much bringing in artists, creative people, alternative thinkers, all the rest of it. And although working on community projects at the invitation of the communities, there's a different component coming in. It's not, the ideas are not really homegrown. This was in fact a theatre performance drawn from the fact the village want to re-establish performing arts in some form, and we got Ray Davis from the Kinks to write the school play and direct it, which was kind of a fun thing to do. Not really, it was really hard work. It was fun. And there's your own Fernando. You have the cheese school. So these are, so just making the point about the integration being very much part of working with people and with these communities and developing businesses in a way, enterprise projects, with the idea of a kind of patchwork or economy, so that people can drop in and out of different projects, different ways of generating income as and when it suits them. So we set up a shop, catering company, food processing, all sorts of things, and they all kind of work, but they all work on an open basis, so they're not really controlled by any one person or any one organization. Or that used to be the case, slightly changed. The more successful all these things become, the more issues there are around people taking control of them. So in fact, this building is now being run by the parish council, because the building, when we first got involved with it, its turnover was 45,000, and then but its turnover is now 250,000. So for quite a small village, it becomes quite significant. Well, it probably is the biggest village employer, pretty much. Becomes quite significant, and different local politicians and power brokers, you can't really call them that in a small village, but people who want to control things take control, and it's been quite an interesting challenge. So one of the things that we've done a lot of over the last 10 years is to work with this, with teams, in effect, groups of artists and designers alongside local people. So we would do quite a lot of projects outside of the UK, and we'd take maybe a team of 6 or 8 people, including, in this case, for example, this is in Korea, and this was a craft classroom, part of an alternative idea for a playground. And we had a carpenter from the village with us, a farmer and a cook, and 2 artists, designers really. And we so that we started to notice the impact that had on the people that came with us and were involved in those projects, and that seemed to be like a way forward to avoid this problem of always bringing in the creative people, the ambition being to help local people think more creatively themselves and not always defer to the kind of something that someone else has done, or something they've done before, or something the next village over has done, and to try and think of new ways of working. And what we noticed, for example, the carpenter who worked on this, who came to Korea with us, also came to Switzerland and a few other projects around the world, and was an integrated member of the team and started designing and so on. Never really been out of the village before. And he realized that he could basically do his trade anywhere in the world. So that last year he built a house in Greenland. So he didn't really change what he did. He just he changed the way that he did that kind of work. So it was a really interesting change for him, making his life much more interesting, energizing him significantly, and bringing also those influences that he's picking up in other parts of the world back into the village. So he now runs the performing arts program in that village hall that I showed you. So that's one of the things that he's involved in. So he's very much more engaged and creative in how he does things. So we do, this is another project outside of the UK. This was for the Irish Museum of Modern Art. And the idea of this was to create an economy from courgettes. So we had a big courgette farm in which we grew courgettes in fermented straw bales, and we built a whole load of things. I won't go into the detail of it, but again, in this instance, and this really was one of the first projects in a way that when we were thinking about how the collective of different communities would influence one another and inspire one another. And so we had 3 different villages that joined us on this project and contributed to different parts of it, and in effect set up exchanges, all of which are kind of still intact and quite helping each of those communities develop interesting ways. And there's Fernando again, just working with some local resources. Just threw that one in for the vegetarians.
Can I see again?
Biblical.
That was a nice
Oh,
one.
Fernando.
We hunted by hand. So no, it was a face-to-face.
It is again an example of local resources, which are very much, most of the resources in an area like this are very underused, and nobody really thinks creatively about how they might work together. So that's been a sort of strong theme for us, and that's a strong motivation and interest in the Confederacy of Villages, or Collective of Villages. This is so coming out of that, all of this work, we've also been trying to generate infrastructure that people can be involved in the building of, but also in as systems for running other things. So running schools, running small scale businesses. So this is a pizza oven, a bread oven that was built with a school for the village. This is the entrance to a bee garden in Japan, where we start with just staff. This is the first stage of building a teaching facility for the village to teach people how to keep bees. And we're introducing lots of different ways of keeping bees. So this is in fact a Slovenian bee house, which is a early 20th century beekeeping process, which happens to be quite applicable to Japanese bees. But again, this project was built using two different schools. We ran 2 schools in Japan to do the build. And this is another small scale build project done with a school, looking at some more traditional materials and techniques and work. So the idea of all the schools is they very much integrate into the place. So they draw on, again, what's available. So this is in our valley, and this is part of a teaching garden. So we're setting up a garden to teach people how to grow and what to grow if they want to expand into something more commercial. So we're looking at we've tested out lots of different things that work here that you might not expect to be growing in the Lake District, like wasabi, for example, or tea. And so I'm not going to say a lot more else. Obviously, there's lots more to talk about, but I think I'm just giving you kind of the idea, the ethos of the organization, and the kind of what we're interested in terms of the village, the partnerships with all of you, and how we can try to develop collaborative working, really, rather than exchange. But what we have just done in the last year is to buy this pub by raising funds from a wide range of people, both from the international network, our arts network, and from majority, in fact, from local people, mostly on quite a small scale. But so there's no big benefactors here. This is all people's things, people power. And this building is in a pretty bad way, and we're going to be trying to reinvent it for 21st century. So what the role of an inn might be, how we might diversify it, how we use it as the gateway for the rest of the resources of the area, the whole valley, and how we use it to draw together and create collaborations. So we want to invite all of you to come here and work on projects with us here, and vice versa. But yeah, we now have a kind of well, we have quite a lot of accommodation suddenly. This has got 12 bedrooms, and then of course Lawson Park has more. Okay, so that's that. Emma, did you want to say anything about the farmers, or?
No, I think like you say, perhaps we should keep the presentation short.
Yeah.
Not bore everybody with the details. But yeah, I think perhaps it's just important to mention about the farmers that we see it as a space where all cultures can come together, so all local cultures come together, but also that, you know, the cultures from our other like our national international networks are also part of that. So what I was going to say is, for obviously you responded, Adam, to the questions that were outlined in Begonia's original email invitation for today. So perhaps now it might be good to go around and maybe if everybody sort of responds to those questions.
I mean, is that enough what I've written? Is that clear to everybody? Does that, you don't need me to talk through those, that's all makes sense. I think perhaps just to say that, I mean, Fernando and I think we said at the last meeting, we tried to set up something like this 10 years ago. And then it sort of didn't really, everybody had such different ambitions, I would say, in that group that it didn't really move forward. And then probably 3-4 years ago, Fernando, you were involved in a meeting with another group of people who were more like villages that had museums in them, or they had kind of institutional infrastructure. And again,
which one was that? Sorry, the international.
Like Dartington Hall and Zakopane, those museum kind of. So, although they're really interesting projects, but the institutions. So there were small villages with quite powerful institutions within them, but the institutions were so. It was so difficult for them to be flexible about how they worked that we couldn't really move it forward with them. So they're all super supportive and everything, but they just can't do anything, including they can't be involved in funding applications half the time because they've got so many other complicated stuff going on. So in a way, this is kind of the third iteration of this idea of working collectively and collaboratively, and the value of that and how that impacts on our own communities and our own way of working. Yeah, so shall we go, do people want to voice their sort of thoughts?
I would like to ask a couple of questions, Adam, if possible. Two things. I'm very good. Thanks for your presentation. I'm little by little I'm learning how is shaped, and just start to imagine. Unfortunately, I've never been there, but hope soon. One thing, how is managed every day? How big is your group? I've seen, for example, the garden, all these infrastructures that you built in the park, how they are managed. And it's connected with another question. You told in the presentation, you used the term integration of the of the citizen or of the village or the villagers and the people around, and not inclusion. No, because you think and this idea of integration, you feel it's like moment of sharing, but the infrastructure it's thought as a common. So with the idea that in a way there is this sense of belonging on the community, or it's more as cultural center that provide service for the community. How the distance between the village and the institution.
Yeah, well, the organization is small, so the core staff is two full-timers, and then we have quite a few freelancers. The way that we usually work outside of COVID is that we, in effect, have groups of freelancers who have specialized areas of interest. So there's an architecture and design group, there's a publications group, there's a food and catering group, and they're mostly made up, they are all made up actually, pretty much all of artists with interest in those areas. And so we do projects with those groups, and those groups that then work with communities. In terms of integration, for the last 10 years, we've taken the position that we don't do anything unless we're invited to do it. So the community has to ask us to do something with them or help them with something, which means that they control the project. It means they understand the project, and our role is really to expand what they had in mind, I guess, to make it broader and to connect it up with other things. So through those village projects, we then deliver not only the village project, which is the priority, but then we use it as a spin-off for museums and art world and so on, which for me, on the whole, the art side of it it's a bit of light relief actually, because it doesn't really matter if it goes wrong, whereas it kind of does matter if things go wrong in communities. It can be quite high. It is quite a high pressure and quite a fragile, complex relationship with local people. I think some people really hate us, and some people love us sometimes and not other times. And I think it's real. It's a real relationship. I don't think we're really, in this particular village here, I don't think we're really seen as part of it. We are 3 or 4 miles outside the village. And I used to think we weren't really seen as part of the local community because of the cultural difference. And I think that's part of the reason. But I think actually it's much more geographic than that. And it's a sense of territory. I think that's a big theme that we're interested in, that kind of notion of territory, who owns what, and who's, the territorial quality of culture and of, geographically, obviously, as well. But actually what I've understood is the village don't see anybody who lives outside the village as being part of their community. So when we proposed to the village that we would take this formula that we developed with them and apply it to the valley, they said, no, the valley's not part, we're not interested in the valley. We don't want to see any resources or energy going into the valley. We want it all to come into the village. So in fact, I feel as an organization and as residents of this area that we're much more part of the valley culture, the local farming communities and other activities that go on in the valley. We're much more part of that than we are part of the village community. So yeah, it's interesting. But I think that whole belonging, not belonging, whether people think we're trying to take over sometimes, there are lots of ideas that come up. Even in other villages, like in Japan, there's a few people that have started to say, well, are you trying to take over the village? Are you trying to turn it into an art village? All these kind of things start to come forward. I think it's a real it's a difficult one to maintain that balance. So important, really, not to have a hierarchy. So the idea with the Farmers Arms is that because we've been able to buy the building, it's kind of, we can say, right, okay, we're starting from a level playing field. Everybody has got the same value and status on this site, and we are all. You may not agree with other cultures or other ways that people want to do things here, but you're going to benefit from them. You're going to be tolerant of every kind of activity, and we're going to see that as the real plus of this site, is that we've got these potentials, interactions for driving creative process forward. That answers your question.
There's a lot of reflection also. I think we touched some terms that would be really nice to go through the different villages and to understand, because it's very interesting to hear, and I reflect on also on the dynamic in our village. No, so yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nando.
Thanks a lot for the survey, a little bit on Grisdale long history. I think that it will be at some point also useful and practical to extract from each of the projects like strengths and particularities or aspects that will help to make like what would be the polyphonic, the composed ideal village entity, that we can all somehow create. Thinking on this kind of the Japanese characters, where there are like little characters that make the big robot and so on. In the case of Grisdale, something very important, I think, is, for example, the progressive interaction with the village, but being somehow an outsider agent. I think that's something that, for example, in the case of Casa de Agricultura is different, because it's like an endogenous, that we would say in our college, an endogenous initiative in which the villagers themselves, let's say, let's get together and let's start to activate ourselves through farming, the economy, and cultural experimentation. So this has been a very beautiful history of success in the case of Grisdale, the process of like being appointed as a director institution, making things that at the beginning were really pissing off everyone. They were burning even a poster, or you remember the billboard? But then, yeah.
Not
then
everyone.
Then the other question. Then the other question is the particular aspect and reality of Grisdale as being as one of the most successful art institutions in a rural area of the whole of the United Kingdom, with quite a considerable support of the Arts Council and the lottery funds, but nevertheless looking very carefully at how funding happens and how economy works as a, let's say, as a transfer of energy, of resources, of values. So I remember when Honesty Shop started, was the first moment with Grisdale, I think, well, before maybe Adam was trying to pick some pennies from some high teas or something like that, parties. But I think the Honesty Shop started to place in the center of the whole equation and proposal of Grisdale Arts is to say, well, this is not just culture in a sense of elevated needs, satisfaction of in different interests, but also about making processes that sustain the people and sustain ourselves, based on applying creativity to the local resources and know-hows, and actually shuffling all them and bringing other completely alien, like things you could do with bracken in Japan, to try to apply them to the lake history. So I think that this is something interesting, despite having a quite of of a well-off situation, no? I don't know if you say that, to at the same time try to create a process of progressive autonomy, no? Or at least to reflect on the possibility of autonomy. And I guess that the Farmers' Arms is facing that. No, it's not a project of the Arts Council. It's different from Grisdale. It's like an entity that has to run on its own feasibility. And you created a very interesting also like a seed capital system at the beginning, and for sure something that will come later in the functioning.
And we're trying to get out of being funded, basically. We're trying to leave that culture, because I think the way the Arts Council fund, the way the trusts and charities and sponsors fund the arts is very divisive. It's very much, it means a certain kind of activity happens, and it predetermines a way of doing things. It makes for organizations that aren't very flexible. For example, the organizations I talked about that we tried to work with before. And I think it divorces you from the communities that you're trying to work with, because they don't get the culture under which you get a grant and you're supported. And the argument I try to make locally is that we get grants in the same way that farms get grants, and we get about 50% of our income from grants and about 50% earned, which is more or less the same division that most of the local farms have. They just spend their money on other things. But yeah, the ambition is to see, and particularly with the farmers, where we haven't got any funding apart from the European money, well, some bits and bobs, but we're not trying to get a big fund that we drop onto a project and go through a sort of complete transformation. It's a very slow, organic process where we're going to do small things at a time. It's going to be a composite of elements that are drawn together through this network of people that we've worked with and developed over the years, and I think that's a very different way of developing an organization, developing a way of working. And I'm very hopeful that this time, I'm in my 60s now, so we've tried a lot of different ways of working, of art having its vital role in society. And I'm hopeful this time this will be the most successful to date. You've always got to start a project thinking that, haven't you? This is going to be fun. 10 years later. So yeah, the program, we very much work in 10-year cycles. So although I've been here 20 years, that's been two 10-year blocks in effect, really quite different programs. And this third 10-year block is another program and another approach. But I think very important that people know that you're committing yourself and you're committing the organization, you're committing the resources over a long period of time, that you mean it. Plant an orchard, always a good thing to do at the beginning. Then people know you're going to hang around for the harvest. 10 years. So do other people want to go through their thoughts about why they're in the answer to those questions? Have people had time to have a think about that?
Yeah, I was just going to open out now to see if anybody else would like to respond. But also I was just thinking as well, Adam, that maybe it was worth mentioning the point around funding, just that obviously if everybody pays a little bit for something, and we take that same economic model that the Coniston Institute has, it helps to maintain a good quality across the programme. But also, because I think the arts, visual arts seems to be the only thing where every workshop has to be free. Theatres are paid for in other art forms, but the arts seem to be.
For quite a long time, we've taken the view that we don't try and get money out of rich people because they then control things. We try and get money out of poor people, but very small amounts. So everybody pays for everything, us included. So if we use a building, we pay. not very much. Everybody pays. And it's amazing how just tiny amounts of money, when I say tiny amounts of money, I mean to hire the dining room and the kitchen in the village hall costs £10. So it's
for
really...
for the day, not per
the
hour,
day,
for the day.
For the day. So it's a really small amount of money, but every bit it builds up. And I was really amazed to discover that the Institute, the village hall, was turning over 250,000. I don't know how that happened, but so no grants, no dependence on, it is, it's a contribution from all the people that use the building, in effect.
And that just helps it to break even, which is ultimately is the,
yeah.
goal.
So obviously, we don't need to do any more than make these things break even.
Yeah. So I'm gonna just see if anybody else wants to chip in here. Lisa, have you had a thought about the questions from your side?
Did you say Lisa? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we actually discussed it a bit before this meeting now, me and Ragnar and Sergio. And it was a good thing of you to send the questions so that it made us think and discuss it. And also thank you for the presentation. It was really inspiring to see what you have been doing in 20 years. It's really motivating for us to see, because we're a really small organization and also quite new, like very young. We got our house that we're using now 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and it was in quite a bad shape. So we have been doing a lot of reconstructive works and so on. But we had, for these 5 years, we had been doing kind of the same thing for a while. So it felt like we had, not like we couldn't get any further, but we had been doing this and we felt like comfortable with doing what we're doing. It was a lot of public events and also like a studio for us that we're working with artistic works and creative media. And we felt like we need to develop ourselves, like how far can we go and what can we do? So we felt like we needed to have like more of a long-term perspective, and we needed something just give us the ride kind of, or help us to get there. So also I think it was very inspiring for me because I went with Sergio to Castiglione, sorry, thank you, Sergio, Castiglione. And when I went there, I was really inspired to see like, wow, this is what we can do also, not in the same magnitude, but I think that was really like eye-opening to see what you can do. And I think also the villages of Europe are really different. Like there's a huge gap between what it looks like in the rural areas of Italy from the rural areas of Sweden, but still we have a lot of things in common. So I think that it will really help us to go further in a way and see what can we do. And I think we needed like some kind of fuel to our organization, and I feel like we are getting it now. I don't know, Ragnar, if you have something more you want to.
No, I agree with you. It's about seeing what we're capable of doing and what we can do with our organization. And a project like this, when this offer came and we talked about being a part of this, it's a great chance for us to work with bigger projects over longer time. Yeah.
I guess if I might interrupt for a moment, can I just very quickly?
Yeah.
That I guess that the challenge is to move from understanding, acknowledging, and seeing what could be done in other contexts, as you said, with very different conditions, demographically, ecologically, and so on, and try to situate that experience or that focus in your own context. Like what could be the equivalences, what could be the paths or the angles that you could take to look at the potentials of the place, because every place has its pros and its cons. Like, for example, Grais del Arts is also in a context of a land that is like very, very, let's say, coveted and treasured, because of how precious Lake District is as a luxury destination. So a young person wouldn't dream even to get a little house in the Lake District so easily, but I guess it's quite cheap in northern Sweden, for example, or relatively cheap, you know, like compared with other
exactly
places.
like the villagers where we are, they are just super positive, and they will help you with everything they can. And also the municipality of Nordmaling, they just help you with everything they can, because they are so eager and so positive to help you and to have young people coming to the countryside. So
yeah, I mean, they gave us the house. They gave us the house for free so that we would take it. Yeah.
Maintain it, like.
Yeah, just so someone will maintain it. Yeah.
Those differences are really interesting, and the exchange that we have between here and Japan. Like here, houses are really expensive. In Japan, every time we go, they give us another house. I mean, we really don't want that many houses. It's a nightmare. But there's no value in the net, and about 50% of the village is empty houses. But actually here, about 50% of the village is empty houses because they're second homes. So actually, you've got the similar resources for different reasons, and then, but potential, you've got a lot of things, really everything has its equivalent in these other communities, and it's seeing things that don't work as well as things that do work that help create a more creative way of thinking of what to do with those resources and how they can be connected up. Japan's had a big influence on what we've been doing here without them knowing it, and vice versa. So I think, yeah, that's what, for me, that's what's exciting about working with all of you, is to see what you've succeeded with, to see what you've failed with, and to see problems that you're able to solve and problems that you're not able to solve, and same for us. But we, from that, it's not a very, you know, it's a very sort of organic way for ideas to evolve. It's not forced, and I think that's really important that it isn't. You know, one of the problems of setting up things is you can end up trying to force things, and then those generally don't work so well. Things just will naturally evolve through a process of exchange and collaboration. Or certainly that's been my experience with the success, principally with the successes here.
Okay. So Lisa, if you haven't got anything to add to that now, because I feel like it sounds almost like what Adam's just posed about what we're interested in getting out of the project is also very much in line with what you're realizing you can get from the project too.
I think also what we talked about, the aims of the common aims, we were also a bit unsure about that, and we said that you were all sorry, the baby's crying.
Don't worry about that.
No, but you are able to work a lot with like organic farming and farming in general, but we don't have that angle, or that it's very difficult to work with farming, I think, in northern Sweden, but it's absolutely something that we can try to develop and try to talk more about and see if there's something we can do about it, because it's not a lot of farms left up in the northern Sweden.
No, there's a very few farms that has any form of food production at all around here, and they're all shutting down one by one, and they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, or they are the smaller, more ecological, yeah. But it's and in the north, here in the northern part of Sweden, there's even less than in south of Sweden, and there's, yeah. So I guess it's maybe similar in
I mean, there's a lot of similarities there. The farms really here are being pushed into a kind of boutique farming, you might call it. And what we are quite developed in here, which is really has been a good example for other places to look at, is tourism. Not that we want to encourage tourism, quite the opposite. But you see the damage that tourism can wreak on a community, on a landscape, on a culture. And this area here is completely cleaned out. There is no culture left. It has to be rebuilt, has to be reinvented. And tourism has been this really quite malevolent force in many ways in an area like this. And we see all the time, often we get invitations from organizations who understand tourism as something really beneficial that their communities want. And I mean, I think there are ways of making tourism work and making it a really valuable participatory activity where you draw something, where there's an exchange. I mean, we're talking about tourism in the way that we all work together, and an exchange of seeing how other cultures work, how other people do things. But yeah, we're a great example of don't go down this route. If you want to retain a healthy community, don't dedicate yourself to tourism. The tourism here generates an extreme competitiveness between people and between communities.
Luigi, I felt like you had something to add in there as well that you wanted to say.
Yes, maybe the point of view relating our participation here. It's for me, it was this sense of duration that everybody was talking today, but also in the other meeting. It's very important. And in this confederacy, there is this sense of duration, because I feel with Fernando, Sergio, Irene, René, and Lisa, they come. But I know that it's a process that we started. We have seen many times, because the peculiarity of our place, as Fernando was saying, it's there is a community that is the process came inside from inside the community. So it's coming in Castiglione needs this process of understanding. There is no mediation, cultural mediation, or cultural institution that mediate this process, but has to be come understanding the complexity also of the relation of everyday life, how the things going, the different will of the different people, because everyone inside needs to be inspired to work every day and to contribute every day. So it's not. We tried, for example, at the beginning, this idea of residency with many people, especially with Triom University, that was a big mediator between all of us that we knew in Castiglione. But this process, I understood, for example, everybody understood that it's very important to going on, to go deep in the process of exchanging each other, because it's the beginning is just to know. It's most of the time we have seen with the attention that we had recently, there is this idea that you often you lose. It seems that you lose your time, because at the first moment you need just to open yourself and to present yourself, no? But the good start after this moment of presentation, when you start to go a little bit deep in the process of exchanging. So for me it was very natural, and also with now that I'm getting to know a little bit more the work of Grijsdel art, I'm really curious to also to install this reciprocity in the exchange. So these are the answers also what we would like to get out of it. Of course, for example, for the community, we have seen this moment of exchanging are very important, also to understand, to reposition ourselves as we were saying before, this idea of restanza that we are trying to practice, it means also maintain this foreign gaze, no? When you live in a place, you try to stay, you try to resist, but you need to preserve always this kind of distance, even when you live inside, when you are completely involved inside.
Luigi, can you define restanza? Was resistance,
yeah.
speranza, no? And hope.
It's lontananza, vicinanza. It means it's many things. Restanza, there is also resilienza. So it's it's a Italian philosopher that argumented on, and it's a neologism in Italian. It means resistenza, resistance, staying, and at the same time, yeah, trying to change. No, this idea to preserve, to stay in a place, but without incorporate them, without trying to change. Preserving this foreign gaze when you are there, mainly because our place where the migration was very present. So there are so many people that are looking at the place from outside, that is kind of ghost of the past for many of them. The villagers are out of the village because all the young people are left. So there is this sense of nostalgia also that is very present in the place. And it's very typical, I think, in many villages, but especially in the south, the many south of the world, where there was a process of migration, and there is at the same time the new migration that is coming. So it's quite complex feeling of staying, that trying to redefine the way we stay in a place.
New migration with the migrants from, for example, Northern Africa, which is very present, in the southern of Italy.
The migration. There were three waves of migration of Italian that went from the south that went first in the beginning of 19th century in very far, and then there was a second wave in Italy, in the south of Italy, from south to the north, and Europe, Belgium, France, other places. So everyone has at least at home 5 or almost all the people had experienced the immigration also, no? For short or for long, they came back, because almost everybody has this experience of being in a place but be outside at the same time. So, and it's very difficult to position ourselves, because it's a place where there are many refugee centers, because Italy, the south of Italy, is a place where most of the European comes in, together with Greece. So it's a very complex feeling on that. And complex work when you think the way to stay and to include people in thinking in this idea of evolution, that I like much more than the idea of development. I don't think we need to develop, but just to evolve and the complexity that we feel necessary, in our process.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of migration is interesting, that the countryside, rural, is a place of constant migration. So there's been a huge drive away from the rural here. Historically, there's both, it happens both ways. Somewhere like Japan, they're desperately trying to encourage people to move to the countryside. They're offering grants. They're very enthusiastic about inward migration. So there are a lot of, everybody's probably got different versions of all of these issues around that. And we have, I think Britain, is the only country in the world that has more people moving from urban centres to rural places. And that has only been the case for the last 10 years, but it's increasing. So now, particularly post-COVID, there's a strong likelihood of it increasingly more significantly. But yeah, it's fascinating to see how other how other places are managing that and drawing benefit from that process.
Okay. What I was going to suggest is, I think we've just had a few more people join. So perhaps if our partners in Armenia, if you have some responses to the questions that you want to come in with. I know that you've only just joined, but what we was going to, because I'm also aware that there's a few other people in the room who perhaps we all don't know who they are yet, and maybe we should also introduce.
The meeting is at 11, right? Or are we an hour late now?
An hour late. It was at 4 o'clock Central European time.
How come?
I think maybe the last one was 1 hour late after.
Was.
So
yeah, so we moved it forward by an hour this time.
Oh, that's weird because we didn't. I mean, it was. I see now that it was written, but I didn't think we agreed to that when we last met. So it wasn't highlighted as a major change, so we didn't notice it.
don't worry. Yeah.
No worries.
Anyway, yes.
No, we'd rather not jump in speaking.
No.
Okay, no problem. Well, Fernando, do you have something else to say there?
I wanted to answer the questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
But also I wanted to say that we will have later the chance to have, if they want, questions from Nico and Jamie, who I propose to be representatives of the collectively study group that are looking at Confederacy of Villages as a case study and proposing things, and even they would like to come in person if we meet physically. But we all agreed on this little set of recommendations and rules for these meetings, in which we all the partners meet first and talk for a little while. Then there is a moment for exchange with the first row respondents, and also that the people intervening try not to speak for more than 2 minutes on a row. So that applies for me from now on. But well, I just wanted to say that
you, Luigi, there. Carry on, Fernando.
Thank you. I think that the reason for me to join in the Confederacy of Villages, and I would say that I firstly joined the idea that Grais del Arts was proposing and launching, no? And we were talking about it, as Adam was saying in the very beginning, in conjunction with the other institutions and so on. I found very important to break the, let's say, the isolation and the silence of what we are trying in Spain. It was unusual to look at the rural as a space for creation 10 years ago when this started. It was even more unusual 20 years ago when I started more individually, and I remember I met Grais in 2007. But then the idea of cooperating and exchanging amongst the spaces was crucial to open a field of reflection and practice for the arts in general. By then, in Spain, people were talking about arts and nature, not even rurality. So we were like in the moment of land art, earthworks, and so on. So it was really important to start to think that also political art, it's about thinking on how art politics work, the politics of an art system, the careerism, the individualism, the isolation, hypermobility, funding, expected funding forever, and so on. But I think that now we are not just joining, but promoting within the context of this Creative Europe project. And for me, the aim is double. On one hand, internally, to make sure that we create spaces of mutual support and mutual exchange, mutual learning, not only for ourselves, we are privileged, like, let's say, learners and travelers, but also for the villages themselves and crafters and people that could be super inspired by knowing that other person in other villages doing this and that. And I deeply believe in a culture of coming together and doing things of the villages. I've seen that with the fiesta culture, that traditional people were like doing, their own moments of common work and common celebration. So this is just to bring a new breathe into that, breathe a new focus or angle in contemporary terms. But also, secondly, external, in an external sense. I think we need to develop now a network of clear ongoing models and work in progress with our projects that gather a series of criteria that we should start to define in order to offer to other practitioners around in Europe especially, but also in other parts, with an idea of what to do with your talent, with your will to do something beautiful or useful, and your will to maybe be in contact with the land. So I think it's very important that parallel to what we try in our villages, we make an effort to communicate coherently and motivatingly enough, if you can say that, around us. And especially looking at, as I said, the young practitioners from the cultural field that they maybe don't want to be like, indebted for a title from Goldsmiths for a degree, 25,000 pounds or whatever, without knowing what they will do next. And also for, I'm over my 2 minutes now, and also for the young people that want to be back into the land. And they feel that if they do that, they might be just losers because they are just not part of the cultural conversation. So we need to make very clear that the cultural conversation and the really vibrant things and revolutionary things are happening in these specific locations in the peripheries. And just to add, for inland, this network is very important, Lumbung, Conference of Villages, also the Lumbung one I mentioned with Documenta that has similar projects. And we were also working with an Ibero-American network of independent art spaces on city countryside context with Colombia, Mexico, or Argentina, or there are very beautiful things going on there. So I would leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Fernando. Okay, great. So if anybody else has any responses to the questions that we posed before the meeting, otherwise perhaps it might be good to have people who have joined the meeting today to sort of observe in the first half hour to maybe respond as well. And then I did outline that it might be good to think about those collective aims during this meeting as well. So maybe after that, it could be a good way to think about that too. Okay.
Nico?
Yeah, so Nico maybe,
Yeah.
and Jamie, and then I think Alan has also joined.
Yeah, Jamie is also from the CPRC course. So hello to everyone. I'm very, very glad to meet you and hear you talking about your projects. Indeed, I'm a graphic designer and a teacher based in Strasbourg in France, and working a lot with rurality in Les Vosges du Nord as for my own work. And with Jamie and 3 others who were artists and educators too. And we are working in this postmaster led by Grégory Castera from a council and it's based in Norway, in Sweden, in Stockholm. And so what we took first a long time because to discover each other in the group and to understand also since September what's the purpose of the Confederacy of Villages. And so we are also on the same process as you are, I guess. And it's very interesting because since the beginning of the discussions we are having with Fernando and also with the rest of the group, we are always trying to redefine what is it, and what can it be. And so we really would like to meet in physical and to propose ways together, and which is not only talking through the tool of Zoom, but also proposing some different ways to create assemblies and to gather and to deal with what to do with each other. By example, we first worked on different covers, and it's only book covers with fake books, and so we now have a collection of about 35 titles of fake books, and this is something that we would like to give you as a way to talk. And is it a book that is interesting for the Cove, and dealing with the Cove as a publisher in this case. So we are also dealing and talking about assemblies, and to involve the body much more than in a Zoom situation. So we plan to make proposals either for April or later to go on and to create situations of gathering thoughts and knowledge, and dealing with the mutualization of knowledge. Jamie, do you want to add something?
I was just going to say, Jamie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, I'll just say hello. So I'm Jamie. I'm based in Manchester, and not so far from Grisdale. I'm from Ramsbottom originally. And yeah, so we're all part of this course, and we all have different backgrounds and interests. So for me, I'm actually from cinema background, and have a project called Cine Caravan, which is traveling to rural areas, showing short films, short documentary films, and leading filmmaking workshops. So it reminded me what you were saying before as well, Adam, about like, yeah, it's not like about making a great film. It's about saying like, look, you you have a lot of creativity. You I don't know, encouraging like creation from people who maybe didn't even think of themselves in that way. So we came together through this course that we were interested in Confederacy of Villages, and because it's so distant from us at the minute, we just started with this speculation. So this is why we started with the book, like speculating what would a confederacy of villages look like, and then moving on to this research in how do we assemble, and how could we facilitate assemblies. So this is what we would like to offer as a contribution, these two sort of lines of research.
Thanks, Jamie. So we have some other people in the room today as well. I've got Alan and I've got Lewis.
So I'm here still kind of along with Renee and Irene. I'm sorry,
That's okay, don't worry. Take your time.
I don't know, so take me some more time. I'm currently in Berlin, and I'm an architect and art historian, and I am currently working a lot with publishing and printing as well as the kind of material a practice, and then also as a kind of organizing and you know, kind of collective industrial making of things, and so I'm interested in kind of inviting people who are working in the, you know, the kind of various aspects of publishing to join a one of these groups with with me to think about that, and then also I would like to to kind of be here to help. I think together and work together with each of the groups in your group to figure out what to publish, how to do that, and how you can use the structures and the resources which you have put together, and so I'm here to kind of help with that.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, okay, good.
Hi, I'm Luis. Sorry, I arrived late. I'm friends with Renee and Irina. I've been participating in 16 Beaver and in Testing Assembling, and they told us a while ago about this project of Confederacy of Villages, and it's very interesting to us. We have been several times in Salento, and also we are actually located right now during this year in the north of Spain, in the Pyrenees, in a rural area, which is where I'm from, and we share also an interest in possibilities of doing projects in rural areas. And around here, we have been actually visiting some occupied, abandoned villages that were occupied by people, most of them a while ago, but some other more recent. And I'm just curious and hoping to help also if I can and participate of the process.
Thank you. Okay. Adam, you look like you're going to say something?
No, not especially.
That's okay. I'm just sort of looking around to see if
I was just sort of thinking about where we've got to.
Yeah.
In terms of the meeting, ambition it's 90 minutes. I think we were aiming at.
Yeah. So we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah. And so we probably should try and sort out what is happening at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Whether there's some potential to talk dates in terms of movement, actual movement.
Yeah.
Britain's got a plan to allow us out. I expect everybody else is heading in that direction too. So that would be good to.
Yeah. Irene has raised her hand, so I think you're ready to.
Yes. Just before, since we arrived late, not because we wanted to just feel disappointed and sad, because I was looking forward to this meeting. Just I want to say, apropos of the questions, at least more my motivation in general in approaching this being together as a group of villages, but also for us as being interested in also the village we are in. I think it's a question of exiting. It's a question of exiting the status quo of the life we are posited, given to as if it is our lives. So it's the political dimension that I am really interested in, and wherein lies the political in our kind of whatever we do, and what mode we can create to enhance that dimension. That is not about isolating a kind of a nice island, we are doing this and we are doing that, or it's not in the realm of like representation nor in the realm of fitting into anything, but something that is constantly open to what is happening in the world at large. Of course, we cannot do it all the time in the same way and take into consideration everything. But I think for me, the beginning of everything is the largest, widest possible view on the world and how we want to live this life. And then comes everything that any action I do needs to inform me and tell me how is it getting into that kind of relation to the world, and how it, that's.
No, and if we add something like a second person speaking.
Not the same timing, new timer.
No, I'll be very fast. I speak too again. No, I think the motivation for us to try to have this kind of form of meeting and assembling together was because like bureaucratic kind of space deadens our way of being together, and professional space deadens our way of relating to one another. So for us, it just was to suggest this space was like as a group of people, like friends. I mean, we're only so many people. Like it's crazy in this kind of way of organizing. You could just reach out to someone and say, hey, you know, we're changing the time from last week, you know, but then like it's embedded in an email that you have to read closely, and if you don't know CET, it doesn't ring a bell in your brain. You just think, well, UK, you know, there's already this hour difference between UK and so if maybe it's, you know, so I just think something for us, maybe it's a secondary response to your question, Adam, but it was like our motivation was to learn from each other and to see how what the knowledges that are present in this space we could learn from others. You know, what we know how to do is assemble with people in different ways, which are not bureaucratic and kind of are orienting towards our political kind of desires and clarifying.
I'll be happy to stay on and go over the stuff that I talked about.
Yeah, no, I think we'll have to listen.
No problem. I'd like to.
Into it.
We were not like it's not a complaint in that sense.
No, honestly, I'd like to. Please, if you don't mind.
We feel terrible about being late, maybe, but also just a little like I really.
Hey, these things happen. It's not a problem.
We're looking forward to something nice,
and
then
been
somebody say, "Oh, you're late now."
You know, 7 o'clock, unfortunately. So it's not even a case like we just jumped out of bed and joined. You know, so we could have easily been here.
Yeah.
I think
Fernando is raising hand.
Yeah, Fernando's got his hand raised, so I'm just gonna. Have you?
Thank you. No, really sorry from our side also. When we were sending the email, we didn't point it out that the time was slightly changing. In any case, don't worry, everything is recorded. We will share it. I think that we were in the right direction by kind of thinking where this discussion of today has placed us. Thanks a lot also for contributing to your own answer to those questions. Maybe my reaction also to that would be thinking on that initial experience we had at Adam mentioned, trying to create the agriculture.eu network of projects based in the rural. I think one of its limitations was also that we had no resources to develop anything together. So on one hand, I totally agree with you on the importance of creating spaces that have their own rhythms and their own rules and conditions for free exchange and for more based on this friendship and learning. And this is what we had before, because I felt I had this with Luigi, with Grisdale, with Lisa and Sergio, and with you, as much as we sometimes exchange emails or messages. But I think that when we apply for this project and the fact that we now become like a legal structure, even under a contract, it's also bringing its opportunities and benefits. It's going to be tiring, it's going to be draining to do bureaucracy and so on. But on the other hand, we can make a publication, we can make a gathering, we can make I don't know, we are going to make a distilling unit or whatever everyone is planning to do in their villages with a co-funding, and this always helps. And sometimes it's also like a cultural capital leverage tool, because at least in Spain, there were only 2 organizations that got Creative Europe this year, and we got the Ministry of Culture telling, well, you are doing something well if you're bringing partners from all around and succeeding on this. And we use this position to influence how, for example, culture is perceived in rural areas. And as I said, I deeply believe that we have to use these 3 years and hopefully the years after with another basis of collaboration to make a case, to make a point, to say, you know, that that now, for example, Europe is talking about this new European Bauhaus, saying that there will be like a Green Deal or a total renovation of Europe's culture in face of the crisis and the environmental crisis and so on. Well, a lot of talky, but we should start to say that there are specific things that you can do with cultural policy connected with different public policies, farming and so on, and also beyond any state-driven policy to empower a degrowth philosophy and economy and culture based in the land and nurturing relations, whether it's in Japan or in Armenia or in Spain. So yeah, just to say that. And this was a practical point about next meeting, but maybe Emma, you want to?
Yeah, I was going to say thanks, Fernando. So could you remind me who's hosting the next meeting?
Yes, and there are two questions about next meeting, or I had the points before, but I forgot. Well, about the meeting in person, I think that we can wait a little bit more till the end of March to see how things look and then reconsider. Then the 23rd of March will be the last session. It's going to be hosted by Kaif Huset, and we might ask you for a favor in relation to this day, and it is that there are 3 projects in Spain that are potentially coming closer to the ideas we have been working with Confederacy Villages, and that if we could have like a second part of this common conversation to have the chance for them to tell us a little bit of where they are and provide a little bit like a response, a feedback, a tutoring. But this would be like an extra time. So if any of the members of Confederacy Villages have to leave, it's perfectly fine. But we would like to send you a little summary of these 3 projects, just to give you an idea. One is an artist who has been recently awarded with the Social Engaged Artist, and he's like a secular monk that works with homeless people, and he got a big convent from the 15th centuries with all the Duchess of Alf families buried that is abandoned, and the Dominic order gave them this huge monastery, and he's planning what to do with that, and they are developing the gardens and doing other things. The other person is Oliver Laxe, who is a filmmaker, quite renowned. He also got the Cannes Festival Palm for a film based on the rural Galicia and the fires there, and how the rural population relates with the fire and so on. And he's recovering a village and starting quite a good project, a big project there. And the last one is Nyam Nyam Collective from Catalonia. And there is a couple who moved to the countryside. They have been for many years working with food and nurturing and, let's say, recipes and cooking in a kind of interesting way to connect with the political process and so on.
And I was going to say you can add details about these people in an email, which might be better, and we can move to the next bit. So Lisa, is there anything you want to mention about the next meeting now, just for the logistics of it? Because obviously there's been a slight confusion today with time. So should we set a time now and just make sure that we stick to that? Because I think, Begonia, when you sent me through the draft email, there was a question mark next to the time. So obviously that's why I picked a slightly earlier time. So obviously that's kind of where the confusion has happened today. And I suppose we can only apologise for that and make sure now that it doesn't happen again. So would we want to stick at the same time, or would it be that people would, do you have a preference to move to another time?
For us, same time is fine.
I mean, whatever works.
Whatever works.
Just as long as we know.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what I was thinking. If we do it now, everybody knows. So if we say 4 p.m. CET,
would be good for us.
Yeah. Great. Okay, brilliant. So that's set. So that meeting will take place on, it's the 23rd, and Fernando will send through details of the people who you suggest present after the main meeting has taken place. Yeah.
And maybe our Swedish friends, do you have a question you'd want to start to work with now? Like how you thought in a question you would like to prompt all the other villages to think in this time before that meeting? I think the first question.
Send it by email later, so you don't need no pressure now.
Yeah, we will have to get back to you with the question, but we will. Yeah, we will send out some question. I think that's this was a good format to have questions beforehand we can discuss.
Luigi, I can see you've taken yourself off mute. Do you have something to add?
No, just to add, maybe to have a couple of meetings already. We can be the candidate for the next one, not the 23, but the next one. But I have to see also. I would like to share with the community there, maybe to be live from the community meal. I would like to involve a little bit on the community around. So could be nice. Maybe I can check with them and I propose you maybe a time if it's possible, because maybe it's too early because we close the meal at 6. So it's just to fix these things, if you agree.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have anything to add? I feel that we've already used up the 90 minutes, so there's not really, I feel like if we were to launch into trying to set out some aims, collective aims, that would obviously launch us into another long session. So perhaps that is a time for another time. But Adam's offer for those who'd like to stay on, because I know some of you, quite a few people have joined late, then please do. But otherwise, shall we say we close this meeting and we'll see everybody on email after that, and Lisa and Ragnar will set out some questions for the next meeting.
I can write it.
Emma, one quick thing, just that, you know, we had proposed that we try to take collectively some notes after each meeting, so maybe we don't have to talk about it now, but since we came late, no one had done anything relating to that, so it's just something we should think about next time, if everyone is committed or it's just us that finds that value in our conversation to take notes collectively or not. So
just
maybe
keep a trace of it.
Next time we can discuss that together a little at the beginning, just to decide if it's valuable or not, because we proposed that, but
it's not a big deal. It's a nice activity to do together.
Okay. Just to let you know, I took notes and I can add it to the pad, the previous one.
Actually, there is
wonderful.
a second one. That's very nice,
We can put number 2, and it will be number 2.
It's already there, actually.
Okay, send the link on the comments, and I will add it.
Also, we could, well, I guess we have a drive already, shared drive. Yeah. We could bring these notes into the drive as well, and also open a new document, for example, on shared aims, or, you know, if you want to reflect more in this question or in any way, we could keep writing there as well. And remember to fill on the table of what would you like to develop in terms of the residency and the productions and the research and development of projects this summer. This would guide very much, I think, for next conversation. It would be very nice if, I personally haven't done it, but we need to think, we have done it. Yeah. So what would we like to see happening in terms of the residency this summer? Which products, which specific crafts or questions, which even artists we were thinking on having in our places. I think there were 2 kind of categories: the ones we will do for sure, and the ones we dream about, and that we think that others could help us on developing. Okay.
Great.
I can send you the link on the next email.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we just reshare all the links to all the shared drives and collective documents, and also maybe set the one up for the notes as suggested, which would be a nice idea.
Yeah, the only thing about this, just in addition, this is not a contradiction. This is easily accessible, and it's not corporate in any way, and it's not, but it's good to keep a record on everywhere. It's good to copy and paste it. It's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
This is more live,
Yeah, Fernando's also taken some notes on the chat, so I can include those as well, because I recorded this meeting, so it'll all drop into I'll get the chat at the end of this.
Great, we have it now. We pasted it. Study Conf 2.
Yeah. Great. Okay, brilliant. Well, I would say then we close the meeting for today, but those who joined late, please do stay on, and Adam can go back through our presentation and other bits and bobs as well.
Thank you, very generous. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's like the cinemas in the old days, no? You're going to stay for the film, same film again.
Stay for the pew.
Social Q&A.
Yeah, you can stay behind and you get to see the film again if you hide from the cleaners. In the
And reenact the same questions again, but
we have the chat to read.
We have actually, Luigi, you're going to take part in the meeting, a discussion we're going to do in the Japan, the Tokyo Venture Cafe. I'll get in touch with you and we'll talk about that. But yeah, we should probably be useful perhaps to circulate around everybody other things that we're doing, especially if they're online, because I mean, any of you could join that presentation.
Yeah, all our workshop series that we did recently, probably again, we should have circulated that around as well. I should have thought about that.
Well, yeah,
online.
Not everybody needs to know how to make tofu.
Yeah, well, you never know.
Only quick song.
But yeah, well, I mean, yeah, we've all got websites. I mean, I'm guessing everybody's kind of full on and super busy. But I think, yeah, if there's stuff that's kind of that could be useful in terms of understanding more about how each of us works, I think that's kind of crucial at this stage, that we all understand each other a bit better.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would be worth highlighting.
Great.
Actually, I'm coming in next week for some sort of German design week about rural diversification. I should send that out, because that, again, it's all of next weekend. There are about 30 speakers, I think, specifically on rural diversification and design. I don't know much about it. I just agreed to do it. It looks quite interesting.
Send the link.
I'll send a link. I think
you saved the air travel to Germany, but you spend at the end 30 hours in front of a screen, so I don't know what's worst.
I'm spending 20 minutes in front of a screen, Fernando. I mean, unless I watch the whole conference. I think you could look through the list of speakers. There's some things you would want to join, some you wouldn't. Worth having a look, I would say. I mean,
Perfect.
I'll send the thing out.
Shall we go through the presentation again?
Sure.
Yeah. For anybody who's leaving, goodbye.
Yeah.
Those staying,
I want to go through
out and we'll share screens.
Okay.
And Adam, I mean, just to say, I mean, for us, we're just happy to, it doesn't have to be like however way you want. We really could watch the video too. So we just taking advantage that you're there and Emma's there to just learn a little more.
Yeah, it'd be good to have I won't do the same presentation I did earlier on. It was fairly informal anyway.
Yeah.
It's just to sort of let everybody know a bit more about Grisdale. It's an organization that's been around since the 70s. And in fact, I started working here 20 years ago in 2020. And I have a feeling I think we met some of 16 Beaver many, like 20 years ago, when we did a project with PS1, or not with PS1, against PS1. That's called Romantic Detachment. And I think we talked, I can't really remember, it's so long ago, but I remember being conscious of 16 Beaver being an interesting.
Yeah, I remember something in the same way that you recall, because now that you mentioned Romantic Detachment, definitely there were some conversations around that time. That's nice.
Yeah. I think we created some chaos at PS1.
Yes.
Which has long been a kind of, at that period was quite a theme, I think, in thinking about the rural as this place where there was a massive collision of cultures and complexity, which is one of the things that always was one of the things that appeals to me about working in rural places. And I see that a kind of almost as a slightly different way of thinking, that you go from urban space where I lived in London. Well, I was brought up in the rural, very, very rural, similar to where we are now actually, but not here. And I lived in London for 15 years. When I lived in London, everybody I knew was an artist or a designer or an architect or something like that. And then I moved to the rural, and suddenly I didn't know any of those people. So they didn't exist. And so you end up with these very different collisions with other cultures and other ideas. And in a way, it forces juxtapositions and creative leaps the whole time, which I think provokes a different mindset. And it's a mindset you actually see, I think you see it in farmers. And it complements very well with an urban mindset. And the two need to exchange. They both have their strengths and they both have their weaknesses. So I've been increasingly interested in the relationship, I guess, between urban and rural as a beneficial one, and as a part of a kind of ambition for thinking and using diversity as the driver and the energizer behind creative thinking or creative action. Actually, I'm quite action orientated. I'll show you some pictures since I've got them. Have I got them? Where are they? I've got rid of them all.
I just, before I forget, but when at some point in this, before you leave, let's come back to that point about this kind of encounter. And I'll just say the key word is Walter Benjamin and the story, but I don't want to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I'm not very well read, and I don't read a lot. Over my long art career, so I'm aware of lots of things, but I don't. I haven't read Benjamin, for example, but I know the gist of it. But I find, that a lot of the collisions that we discover are obviously well-trod roots in philosophy and in the broader range of cultural thinking. And we are based in the Lake District in this building that I'm just showing on the screen now, which used to belong to John Ruskin. So locally we have this kind of quite interesting connection with Ruskin and interest in what he attempted to do while he was here, and the kind of conflicts that he was involved in. So in the later part of his life, he was quite militant, I guess, and radical, and increasingly ostracized, actually. I always like the story that the last lecture series he gave, he had a series of 12 lectures. He didn't give the last 4, and they were lost because his friends managed to stop him giving the last 4 lectures because they thought they would damage his reputation so much. But one of the lectures he did do is Storm Cloud of the 19th Century, which was about air pollution, which was fairly innovative in its time. But yeah, a lot of anti-industry, anti-capitalist notions. So this building here that I'm just showing is Lawson Park. So this is our house and our farm. I'll just make it go big. There we go. And this is what it looked like 10 years ago. So it kind of represents our philosophy of making the most of what surrounds us and expanding and developing with what there is. rather than bringing anything in. So the gardens are pretty extensive. We have lots of experimental planting, and we've trialed all kinds of things. We do a lot of building. The site's constantly evolving. It involves a lot of people and contributions from a very wide range of people, fairly kind of in a fairly gentle and organic way. So there are no really individual projects. They're all collective. So any, like, the garden has been designed, there must be 50 or 60 people that have contributed to the garden design and development of the garden. There are one or two key people that push things along and keep the energy high. But yeah, so just to sort of illustrating that idea of making the best of what there is. This is another building. So this was 10 years ago, Lawson Park. And then this building was also built 10 years ago from local woodland. And we were just trying to find, a lot of what we were doing at that time was trying to sort of demonstrate, I suppose, kind of exemplar projects. So that's that project earlier in that year. And I think, yeah, over the 20 years that I've been here, that approach has changed. So initially we did a lot of confrontation and criticism, and I mean, we're still quite a critical voice locally and quite unpopular for it. But there was a big emphasis on trying to be honest about the rural context and this place, Lake District, being a very complicated and contested part of Britain, a sort of spiritual heartland, but doesn't really know what its spirit is. So we, in the last 10 years since we've been developing this building, we've also focused most of our attention on working with our immediate community. And this is probably about 10% of the village, in a village hall that was initiated originally by Ruskin as a kind of village school called the Mechanics Institute. And it was semi-derelict, so part of what we've been doing has been restoring that over the last 10 years without resorting to finding funding for it. So we've avoided going to funders. We've largely done it through volunteers, really, ourselves as volunteers, everybody just getting on with it, but also the idea that every part of the building, every action in the building is charged for, but on a very low level. So we have this very small amount of money that as we pay whenever we use a building. Like this is an event we did. This was a theatre event with Ray Davis from the Kinks, who wrote the school play for that year, and came up and directed it as a way of trying to restart the theatre and performing arts in the village to some extent. But we paid to use the hall, although we had basically restored it and made it usable. The same with every other part of the building. So every bit of the building generates income. And over the 10 years, it's gone from generating, it was on point of bankruptcy, the whole setup. It's got a little Ruskin museum in it. It's got this amazing history, which no one's really interested in. But it was turning over kind of 40,000, and now it turns over without any grant help 250,000. So it now has this kind of status. It's a village, one of the bigger employers in the village, and it, as a result, really, of it being so successful, it's gone from being kind of invisible to being quite high profile, and was taken over by the parish council. That basically the local politicians suddenly realised there was some kind of value in it and some status in it. So they, in effect, moved into what was in effect a building without anybody running it, in a kind of power vacuum. So anyway, they moved in, and they've taken it over and they run it. So we're not really involved there anymore. There's a picture of Fernando running a cheese making school. So we tried to set up in the building a lot of small businesses and enterprise projects. And these are an example of a few of them. Mostly centered around the idea that of a kind of a local patchwork kind of economy, so people can drop in and out of things. They want to make more money one month, they can work on several different projects. Most of them are kind of set up along Ruskin's ideas of them being an education type of a learning process, what I term as sort of exchange learning. And then the other part of what and part of why we're interested in the Confederacy of Villages is about working internationally. So what we have done in the past is to always we've been bringing people in with creative ideas to expand on these invitations that we get from the village. So the village asks us to help them with a new cricket pavilion or something, and we bring interesting people in who expand and develop that. So the project remains in the ownership of the village, but is vastly expanded on what they might have expected. But what we really want to happen is for the village to make those creative leaps and think more creatively about how they work and how they live there in a kind of everyday lives. And what we've noticed is that when we do projects, we usually do 2 or 3 projects, international projects every year. This one is just an example from Korea with some festival thing, Biennale or something. And we did that one, but what we would do is take a team from the village on those projects. So in this instance, the village joiner, who'd never really been out of the village and mainly worked in the village in the area, and was kind of frustrated actually. He wanted to change. And then a local farmer and a cook. And what we noticed with these projects, when we start making these combined teams, was that the projects, in a very gentle way, had a very beneficial impact on people from the village. So they started to think much more creatively about how they did their work. And the carpenter, in this instance, he runs the music program in the village in the hall very well, very interestingly. But he also has extended what he does, his own trade, to be international. So he built a house in Greenland last year. So he went and spent 3 months of the year in Greenland. He realized that he could put his tools in a bag, get on an airplane and work anywhere. And he has been doing that. So it sort of transformed his life without actually changing what he does. So that was kind of interesting. The farmer on this project has massively diversified his farm, and it's much more connected with other places and the politics around the rural as well. That's been really energized. So it's kind of, without us really having to push or point anything out, it just organically was able to evolve, which I think was kind of an exciting realization as a way for the community to take control really of its own future, which is kind of what we were trying to push as an arts organization. But it's better if we're not pushing that. It's better if the community are pushing that, people are properly embedded in that. This is another international project. This was for the Museum of Modern Art in Ireland, in Dublin. And this was the idea of generating an economy from growing courgettes. So we planted 350 courgette plants, and then we generated an economy from those plants. And we also, in this project, we brought 4 different villages from different parts of the world to work and contribute to that. And a lot of that, again, that exchange with these communities spun off into changes for those communities and a kind of this exchange learning process. In fact, one of the groups that came was a group called Sweetwater Foundation. Have you ever come across them in Chicago? They're next to Theaster Gates.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, of course. We know.
Yeah, so 6 of them came over and worked on this for a couple of weeks. And then they've taken quite a lot of the things that were generated in this project, the economic things, drivers, products, and they make those there, and yeah, we still have some communications with them. I think Emmanuel's just become too insanely busy to really do anything with him anymore, but which is a shame. They were part of the, so when we first thought about generating this way of working, this exchange process, and the idea of a confederacy of villages collaborating on projects, they were part of that, but well, they're not in Europe, so they got dropped from that side of it. Not really by us, but anyway, here's me and Fernando chopping up a deer, in case you vegetarians don't look. Pretty gory. But again, I just dropped that in for Fernando from a long time ago, but also that kind of illustrates the idea of making use of what there is around us, and the fact that the resources of and everywhere is true, but we obviously deal with these unused resources of people, of skills, of culture, of actual on the ground practical resources, and try and re-energize them and reconnect them. So there's another, and then there's a few projects that are collaborative works with different communities. So this is a bread oven that we built for the village, Ruskin Museum Pizza Oven. This is a school, a beekeeping school in Japan. So we have a program in Japan, and both these projects were done through a process where we had one of our core teams. So the way Grisdale works is it only has 2 members of staff, me and Emma, and everybody else is freelance, and we support different teams that are loosely made up of a common interest. So there's a team that does a lot of design, build, craft, that side of things, and they delivered this along with the team that run the program in Japan. And this is the entrance to a bee garden. So we're developing a beekeeping school in Japan where the villagers teach people how to keep bees, and we're developing lots of different ways of keeping bees, or not really developing that, but using, like, this is a Slovenian bee house, which is a late 19th century way of keeping bees, and sort of a new way of keeping bees, which is very applicable to the Japanese wild bees. And so there'll be 4 or 5 different methods of beekeeping within this school, and it's repurposing some abandoned paddy fields, and it's making use of an incredible resource that they have in Japan, which is an enormous number of wild swarms of bees, Japanese bees, which are have a particular quality. And the fact the village have the skills and know how to keep bees. They don't make any money from selling honey, but they will make money from teaching people how to keep bees. So it's a kind of, yeah, it's a multifaceted thing, project ongoing. And this is back home. So, oh yeah, that was the other thing I meant to say about that, is these are generated by a core team, and then we run schools in different techniques and building processes. So for people that pay, so they, in effect, the projects are paid for by hosting schools, and people come on that. Some of those be principally interested in architecture. Some of them come because they're interested in Grisdale's kind of social engagement program. And some of them come because they're interested in Japanese craft or whatever. There's lots of different reasons, but they're quite well, we have to select people for them. And yeah, just think it's been quite an interesting and successful model on lots of levels. And we've used it, we did it first in Japan, and now we've used it a few times in the UK as well. And this is a teaching garden that we've been developing with a local farmer. And again, another example of a build done through this school system. And what we've just done is to buy this pub. So and this is at the head of our valley, and we saw the potential for this as the kind of a gateway, not only to the valley and a way of connecting and profiling the resources of the valley, but also as a way of acquiring an area of land and property that would allow us to establish a level playing field, if I can call it that, so that we can try and use the three, I would say, kind of three different areas, cultures that we work with, local, arts, and international, in a very even-handed ways, without hierarchy between them, and without the threat of territorial threat, which is such a strong thing in well, everywhere. So this is a kind of a new start on a blank canvas, and we're going to use this kind of to open up and diversify the whole area, but it's also potentially the base that we would want to use with the Confederacy of Villages, and part of that kind of collaborative process that we are interested in going through with all of you, in order to well, energize all of our cultures, reinvent our cultures to some extent. So that's everything. I should say about this building is we bought it by fundraising during the last year, and the funding has come not from institutions or trusts or charities, but from people, from individuals, and not particularly wealthy people either. So we haven't targeted sponsors or anything. It's been a mix of money from our international network, our arts community, and the local community. It has the majority of the money has come from local people, but there's quite a nice spread, which kind of was a nice thing that there's a lot of contributors and relatively small amounts of money to keep this sort of on an even keel to start off with anyway. So we're just about to move into it. Okay.
Well, that was so.
Wow, thank you very much. This is amazing.
Yeah, very exciting.
I was right to be crying at the beginning. We missed something.
It's really amazing. Yes, fascinated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, we know through the website and stuff, but it's nice to hear you, even if it's very abridged, and I'm sure it's just like a gloss. But I mean, for us, like, to answer your question, also, like we all in a way, as kind of general as our interests are, we kind of not specialize, but we all get good at certain things, or are naturally kind of get better at certain things, and so some of us are stronger in some things in this confederacy than others, and so part of our wanting to kind of do this was also to just learn, you know, where we feel we are also weak, and offer what we can from where maybe we have more experiences.
Yeah,
you know, and
I think
and
that's
sometimes
really
that takes like an
the differences are really important, but you know, there's so many times that they're the sort of two sides of the same coin as well, the differences. So I think the issues of like housing, for example, this is a very peculiar area because it's hugely tourism driven, so housing is really expensive, but it's mostly empty. Whereas, for example, in Sweden, they've got a lot of empty housing, nobody wants it. They've probably got the same percentage of empty housing that we've got, but there's a completely, it's on it has a different status, but it doesn't mean to say it's not a resource that can't be used, and it could well be that it's used in the same way. So it's kind of, it's really good to have these different perspectives on. Are they the same problems? They're not really. They're the same set of resources, perhaps. Migration we talked about a bit as well, which is also really interesting to us, in lots of different levels. And yeah, I can see that your strengths also are going to be valuable to us, and they're probably less around agriculture than Luigi's.
Well, we've been also just it's been more than 10 or 12 years, you know. We've taken like courses in biodynamic agriculture things like that. I mean, we've been engaging, but it doesn't mean that we are like, we've been taking care of the trees and pruning and learning,
Yeah.
eating,
watering the land from the source and
a lot of things, but still, we're slow, and we take things also in a holistic manner. So we've been also trying to learn our village, basically, like learn what's growing. First, we wanted to plant a bunch of stuff, and we said, wait, before we start planting things, let's understand what's growing here, and learning how people kind of.
When we first came here 20 years ago, I got in touch with a kind of local land guru kind of character, and he came, wandered around it, and he just said, no, I just wouldn't do anything for 10 years, just get to know your land. But
Yeah.
we've done a lot, and we've got to know our land, and we've radically changed this land. That's kind of quite been a really interesting process of 20 years of, I mean, tons of stuff we've done here hasn't worked, but slowly what we have done is convert what was a complete wasteland. There was really no diversity at all into this amazing biodiverse environment. I know that takes 20 years if you've got a piece of dead land.
Right. Well, that's
20 years to bring it back to life.
In a way, I mean, that's the question. Like, let's say we don't think of ourselves as individuals, right? We think of ourselves also connected to like an epoch, a kind of a collective intelligence that is also situated in different places. And let's say, of course, you could be like hyper capitalistic and you're just looking to like make money wherever you are, and that's a particular program, to follow. But if you're not interested in that program and you're trying to invent another possibility for life, let's say that becomes the purview in which you act. So it's very interesting, like if that timeline of 20 some odd years that we may have met also here in New York. And so it's not neutral where we situate our bodies and what we do. And that's why I feel like, well, it's not to say this is the better thing. We've been searching for something similar, arriving at different insights and knowledges. And so for us, what's exciting about a process like this is like trying to come together, and not about trying to convince each other which way is right, but trying to see, well, how do we put this puzzle together based on what we were asking, what we've discovered, what are the kind of strengths of what we've achieved. And so that's what's really exciting. I mean, and what
I think also like hugely influential is what you've done wrong, and what people don't agree with. I mean, we definitely find that here. That's a driver for a lot of other organizations around us and artists who don't agree with us and want to do things in a different way. And it's always been a driver in my life. I know that. So I think, that sort of, yeah.
But we're very, we feel this kind of sense that we could learn and glean a lot from your experiences. So that's very exciting. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And also the question of Benjamin, I just wanted to mention that he has this, it's one of my favorite things from The Storyteller. He writes this essay on Nikolai Leskov, and it's about storytelling. I mean, there's so much in that essay that's stayed with me ever since I read it. But one thing that always resonates in our kind of meetings is that he says, like, stories emerge like from the guilds. He speculates. And he said in the guilds, like, there were people who were like very situated in a place, and then there were like people who were more wayward, drifters, And so he creates this beautiful image, and I think the story then becomes like a metaphor of like also many things, social change and whatever. But the diagram he makes is like someone who's like deep-rooted knowledge in a place, and then this kind of figure of the drifter. and the mover, and he says that the story is never like only that or that. It's this crossing point between situated knowledges and the one that's like moved, you know, and moving. And I think it's a very rich way for us to like also think about even rural places, and because they tend to be like stuck in the idea of situatedness, whereas actually like whatever emerges even from a rural context as stories have to do with this encounter. And I don't know, something about that moment when you started, I thought that's resonated about thinking with that as a way to also break this kind of dichotomy that often emerges in places that are kind of isolated and have very strong identities that tend to kind of calcify.
Yeah.
And something about that way of thinking stories. And so for us, it's also like about political stories. It's about stories in their kind of capacity to like provoke imaginaries, you know. So we're very committed to like holding that space of both, you know, of this kind of not privileging one or the other, but like how. And so what you were describing about these people who also left the village with you to do projects, and so it's anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not so overtly political in many ways, but I think that very much that it's a political project, this program here, and I'm really interested in your approach and your voice at all these meetings. So I'm going to go because I'm dying to go to the loo. One thing.
Well, we're
see you at the next meeting, eh?
Yeah, thank you, Emma and Adam, for staying longer. We're very sorry we came late.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Don't worry about it.
No problem at all. It's good to be able to share.
If you'd like to add me on the email list, I will be on time too next time.
Okay.
I can let Fernando know.
Yeah, we took notes even of what you did now, but like quite
thorough. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay.
Great, brilliant.
See you soon.
We'll see you on email and then at the next meeting.
Yes, see you next time.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.